to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd. Today, I am joined by Mike Thomas, who's been a season ticket member since day one. How are you doing today, Mike?
Hey, Todd. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to just discussing a whole variety of topics. And I know for the people that are listening, you know, you're going to get the same old, but I'll be sure to throw some questions that I haven't asked people in before. And I just can't wait to get started. So why don't you tell me a little bit how you became a fan of the Philadelphia Union?
Yeah, so, back in 2007, 2008-ish, right? A bunch of those rumors started popping up that Philly may actually start getting an MLS team, right? And around that time, I was like sort of dipping my toe in the soccer waters and trying to, attach myself to a team, and it just wasn't working, right? So I'm born and raised in the Philly area, grew up watching Phillies, Eagles, Flyers, Sixers. You're a fan of a hometown team, and not having a hometown team, it was just really tough to connect to, say, a team in the EPL and certainly a different MLS team. It just didn't feel right. So around that time, there was actually the rumors that Kansas City could potentially be moving to the area, and they wanted to build a stadium in South Jersey. So after some Google searches and Wikipedia, I stumbled across Big Soccer. And from there, I learned about the Sons of Ben and just sort of followed really what was like, it was almost like fan fiction with people creating like mock-up logos and different name ideas, what the jersey might sort of look like. And then I was sort of monitored the whole Sons of Ben from their infancy online, and then was eventually totally pulled in and able to attend the, much like Pat that you just had on. I went down to City Hall when the name announcement, the official name and logo announcement came out, even though it leaked maybe a week or two earlier. Yeah. And we all sort of knew it was coming. But yeah, I as soon as tickets were available, I was all on board. Season ticket holder, put down my deposit as soon as that was even an option. And it's been a wild ride ever since.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to piggyback on two things that you said. One, I can't believe I haven't said this before, but like, I'm so happy when the Union went with the name Philadelphia Union that they didn't put like an FC or an SC in there. I mean, like, that's like so unoriginal. So I'm happy that the Union have an awesome name like Philadelphia Union. They're not putting an FC at the end and everything right there. And two, you said, you finally have a team to support, and, covering the English Premier League for almost 2 years and everything before I decided to switch over to Philadelphia Union. When I started going to games this year and everything, I was like, wow, like you don't get this kind of excitement watching the EPL on TV. You don't get this kind of player involvement by following these guys on social media. Like you see these players flesh in person, you get to interact with them after the games and everything. And like, to me, like this team feels like it's all for the fans. Like it's all about the fans. Like they make you feel like you matter. And that's like one of the first things I picked up on once I went to my first game this season is like, yeah, they actually do care, and they're trying to get involved with the fans as much as possible.
Yeah. And like, that's the big thing for me, right? So, I mean, and I know like Kevin Kincaid says this all the time, right? It may not be the best league, but it's our league. And being able to have that ownership, like this is the hometown team, you root for the hometown team. And even like you sort of get this vibe with a lot of like MLS and Philadelphia Union fans. Like a lot of us are like fascinated with the growth and where things were and where they're potentially going. And like, how big could this thing actually get? And I mean, watching the team the last 10 years or however long it's been now, just seeing like the night and day difference on the field and off the field and how much things have changed and grown and where things seem to be heading for the league as a whole, it's just really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just saw like this morning that it looks like Charlotte's finally getting their MLS team, and they're playing an entry fee of over $300 million, which is insane. Where you look 2 years ago, Atlanta had to pay $70 million. So, I mean, the league's definitely making money and everything. And, I haven't been a fan as long as you have, or a lot of the listeners have, of the Philadelphia Union. But the one thing I can say is, like, when I first started watching MLS in 2007 and then I gave it up and everything. I was like, man, this quality is not good. It's not used to what I'm seeing in Europe and everything. And then coming back in 2017, yeah, the league has definitely changed a lot, and it's changed a lot for the better. And like that's one thing that bothers me. Like I used to be one of those people where I'm like, oh, it's MLS, but it's like if you just give it a chance, if you go out, experience one game in person, it doesn't matter who it's against. I guarantee you, all those thoughts that you had will just disappear.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at some of the players that were playing on the roster, even back in 2010, and I mean, that's very recent history. And you mentioned 2007, which is like when Beckham first came over. I mean, it's really incredible how much like players that were starting or maybe bench players at best today, right? Right?
Yeah.
In like starting 11s of those teams. And yeah, it's just, and I really wonder with the CBA coming up, like how much of a leap forward the league is going to take from here. One thing I always bring up, you mentioned the expansion fee for Charlotte, like 350 million or so,
Yeah.
and just the ownership vetting as these new groups are coming in. And I know we talk about like Jay Sugarman a lot, but like you have to think like, man, by today's standards, I don't even think they would consider him as a primary owner for an MLS group. Just the amount of money that it's taking and the direction it's taking with the new Arthur Blanks, and I forget he's an NFL owner in Charlotte too, and you look at like the criteria Sacramento had to go through and add additional billionaire ownership groups. Like that's the direction the league's trending. They want these big time owners who can spend big time money. So really, in just such a short time span, where Sugarman paid maybe 30 million, 10 years later, it's 300 million more than he paid to get in. So it's been wild. Yeah, it's been really, really interesting to watch.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm not trying to go down a negative road, sorry, not a positive road, but it's like all these people was like, oh, Sugarman should sell the team. And I mean, in a sense, if you're not going to spend the money, I mean, I do agree. But like, if you place yourself in his shoes, why would you sell the team when you're looking how much these fees are going for and you're just pocketing that change and everything? Like he's sitting on a gold mine, and who knows just how many more teams that are going to join the league in the future, and those fees are just going to keep going up and up and up. And it's like, well, what's his motivation to sell the team? So it's like, I do get what people are arguing on Twitter. Well, if you're not going to spend the money, sell the team. But it's like he's making profit from this, so why would he consider selling?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, you look at it from there's sort of like the right and just angle of
Yeah.
things, like what should he do versus
Absolutely.
what's the smart business decision. And yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't, from a Jay Sugarman standpoint, I don't think it'd be wise for him to sell for his own bank
But
account.
as Philadelphia Union fans, we're like, please sell the team if you're not going to spend money. So
Yeah, yeah. And I'll try not to go too negative. I'll probably be your most negative guest so far,
not
but
bringing. I feel like people are a little bit tired of hearing positivity. It's like I feel like people want somebody to relate with, and so I mean, you see on social media all these people being negative. So I mean, if that's how you feel, then bring it and everything. I'm all for it.
well, I feel like this time last year I was much, much, much more negative than I am right now. It's amazing what a good season can do.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, speaking of the season, what are some of your favorite moments from last season? And like I've been telling everybody, don't say the first playoff win because obviously everybody's going to say that. So
Yeah, well, yeah, I was actually tweeting yesterday when I listened to the episode you had with Pat. Like he stole a lot of my ideas, right? Because for me, Atlanta was like the peak of the year for me. I know a lot of people are leading up to that game. We're calling it the referendum game, and it's like, hey, can we hang with the big boys? Can we take the big boys? And yeah, I mean, the Union showed up. They weren't afraid, and they took it to them. And it was just, I was floating on cloud nine. And now part of that may have been I had quite a few drinks before and after the game.
yeah.
So like we pre-gamed at the Larimer beforehand, went into the game, watched an incredible game, sang all the way out and walked right back to the Larimer after game. I was hugging everyone. Latu was in the Larimer. I gave him a big awkward hug, uninvited. So I apologize, Seba. John El Parcero was there. I'm giving him hugs. I was hugging everyone. I was over the moon after that game. But then even Pat, who you had last week, he mentioned he was at the DC game. I was at the DC game as well. That was incredible. I was actually up in like the away supporter section, which
You didn't pull a pad and sit in the DC United home supporter section.
no, I was in I was with the Sons of Ben and Keystone State Ultras, and oh boy, is that a steep I don't know if you've been to Audi Field yet, but
Not yet. I want to go this year.
that is a steep climb up to the top little corner where they shove the away fans. But man, what a great view and what a great time up there. That was actually, especially with a blowout like that, right? We were getting loud and cocky, and the Keystone State Ultras, Corey and them, started the Macarena, the sha la 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 la.
At that game.
Yeah, and that's where we first heard it, and we got it going at the DC game. Not that anyone could hear it on TV because we were up like 700 feet in the air or whatever. But yeah, the very next game after that was the Houston game where the whole stadium got going. And coincidentally, I was in section 101, 102 that game instead of my normal river end seats. And yeah, as soon as I heard that going, I was like, oh, this is what we heard last game. And, we got it going in our section and then started playing off the Keystone State Ultras in their corner. And yeah, that was, it's like I got a preview of the DC game and then the full force of it in that Houston game when it really got going. So that was really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, shout out to Keystone State Ultras. And I'm going to try to get Corey on this podcast and everything. I thought about it. And now I'm like, I just need to try to hit him up. And if he comes on, great. If he doesn't, then, at least I tried and everything. But I've been really impressed with Keystone State Ultra, just everything they've done. And to get the whole stadium involved to do a chant, and it might not be the best chant like Jeff Mitchell said, but it's something that caught on. And it's like, okay, well, if they caught on to this, what could happen next season and everything? Like watching soccer over in England and all the other leagues in Europe and everything, I'm like, you hear it through the TV, these guys singing chants every single section of stadiums and everything. Like that's something I want to experience in Talent Energy. And yeah, we got to experience some of that with the Sha-La-La chant, but can you imagine if the whole stadium starts getting on to more and more chants, like that place can really become a fortress for us going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. And like I talk to Adam pretty frequently. He's always running around up and down trying to get people going. And I mean, I get it. And I'm critical of the Sons of Ben at times, just like I am of the team at times. But, it's all coming from a place of, we want everything to be as best as we possibly can be. And I mean, if any Sons of Ben capos or whoever are listening and don't like when I'm critical on Twitter, I mean, that's where it's coming from for me. And trust me, I 100% understand it's a thankless job. And it's tough to get people involved and engaged. And, there is like sort of a self-consciousness, people need to sort of throw away their inhibitions at times. So, I mean, I get the hurdles. It is foreign for people to chant and sing and, get new things going. But I mean, and Adam's been great in terms of being receptive to like all my crazy song ideas I've been tossing at him. So, toss stuff at the wall, see what sticks, hopefully more than not. Right. So
yeah, absolutely.
Variety.
Because at the end of the day, I mean, all of us want this team to be the best it can be. We want the game day experience to be the best it can be. And things aren't going to stick right away. Things aren't going to go the way we want it to get planned right away. I mean, I can talk about an experience where I sat in the river and all but 3 games, I think, this season. And people were complaining, oh, get the flags out of here. Get the flags out of here. And I'm like, I mean, that creates a good atmosphere. And I mean, I can see where the people are coming from, sitting behind it and everything. But at the end of the day, I mean, you're sitting in the river and creating a environment for the team to thrive on and everything. And if you can't see, I mean, yeah, it sucks and everything, but like you're just trying to be there loud and rowdy as you can. And so you can't please everybody. And I get that the Capos want to try to please everybody, but at the end of the day, I mean, it seems like it's impossible.
Yeah. And one thing I bring up a lot, it's sort of people think of the river end just being like the entire Sons of Ben. And like, that's not true. A lot of people in the river end aren't necessarily Sons of Ben or not necessarily Keystone State Ultras or, there are people that are there that want to stand and be loud and be boisterous. But as a result, that ends up being you have a lot of different mindsets on, what's the right way to support. And, some people are there and, they're there to sing, to chant, and There's other people that, yeah, they're there to sing and chant and support the team, but they're also very, very concerned with actually watching the game, which, I mean, I certainly don't blame them. I sort of lean that way. If I can't see the game, I get a little annoyed, but at the same time, you got to understand there's some stuff that comes with the territory in that particular section, right? And separate expectations.
Yep, and then you have the people that are in the rear end that are just getting the cheapest tickets in the stadium and like, what the hell did I just walk into? So,
Yeah, yeah. But I'm actually conflicted with that too. Like people talk about stub hubbers a lot, or like, the guy that wore a Phillies pinstripe red shirt to a game. But I think there's a touch of like gatekeeping and people getting a little territorial. But if those people are there and showed up to root for the Union and aren't actively rooting for the other team, like Pat was, shame on you, Pat.
yeah.
But right, I think being welcoming and like willing to convert people rather than biting their heads off immediately and sort of like leading by example is probably the way to get a more receptive group from an outsider, right? And maybe convert and win some people over rather than like, whoa, you got a Philly shirt on. What is this? I mean, clearly someone in a Philly shirt's probably going to be there to cheer on the Union, right? So as long as you're in there cheering on the Union, I'm a little more laid back than some of the other people, I guess. But yeah, I mean, that's my thoughts. Like lead by example and hope it's sort of infectious and catches on with other people. That's my mindset, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is a good mindset to have and everything. I mean, at the end of the day, I just want to see, this team just be the best they can be. I want to see us in the River End, the whole stadium, be the best supporters we can in MLS. And I mean, like I said, I mean, you can't get everybody to get on board. You can't please everybody. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to be the best you can, and maybe it spreads throughout the River End. But what about a game 3 for you?
So, right, you've had a bunch of people on that probably hit on all the big ones already. And, I actually had Dallas came to mind again, and I didn't want to copy all three of Pat's when you got to the question. I actually wanted to bring up some of the games, not necessarily good games, but like losses this year. And one that like sort of stuck out to me was just the home opener against Toronto. And even though they lost that game, I sort of got a different vibe from the team in that loss, like where losses in previous years were just flattening and just crushing. But like the way the team played throughout that game gave me like some optimism, right? And like it happened a lot with the losses this year. It's like, yeah, they're losses and it sucks to lose. But like the way they lost was, I don't know, it was just easier to digest and like walk away with your head held a little bit higher than just a crushing loss that we've seen so frequently throughout the Union's history. It's just the way the team carried itself and approached the game just felt so much better to me this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll piggyback on what you said. I mean, the amount of times that the Union went behind and everything in years past, you wouldn't see them have a fighting chance to come back. And how many times have we seen them come from behind and everything this season? Like that's the one thing that I appreciate about every single player on this team is like they have the grit. Not saying that the players in the past didn't have it, but you can tell like these guys, they don't play as one individual. They play as a team and they don't force things. They work. They stick with Jim's system, what he wants to do. And eventually they get a goal. And then sometimes they get the game winning goal to win this game. So that is one thing that I could say is a lot different from last year's team than years prior. It's just like, you knew if they went down behind that they would have a chance to come back and ultimately tie or win the game.
Yeah, exactly. Like in the past, they'd have a lead and you'd be thinking, how are they going to blow this, right? But this year it was a lot of they were behind and you're thinking, how are they going to come back and tie this or win this, right? It was almost the exact inverse of what we've become accustomed to with Union soccer.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I want to move on to something else. The 4-year contract extension with Bimbo. I've been asking the last two people, Jeff and Pat, this, and Dave Canelo, I believe I asked him this as well. But what are your thoughts on this contract extension?
Yeah, so I'm, I guess, in the Bimbo booster camp. I'm a fan of it. I mean, maybe part of that's me sort of liking the team looking like a Mexican team. I don't know, like, right? I look at Bimbo and I think of like how like Club America or Monterey and like Saprissa had Bimbo on their shirt, and like it just sort of looks like I know a lot of people like to gravitate towards Europe, but I sort of maybe look south a little bit when I'm watching some other leagues, and I sort of like that look to it. I get a lot of people hate Bimbo. It's funny. I think there were sort of two camps of why people hated Bimbo. I feel like there was the just purely cosmetic camp of people that like didn't like the red and white bumper sticker that they had, and I totally get that. Like it clashed a lot with the uniform, and they remedied that this year, and it looks like they're gonna continue to remedy that, and I think that actually silenced a lot of people that were anti-Bimbo. And then there's the people that got hung up on the name. I personally think it's silly, but I mean, I'm not a woman. I can't relate to how a woman would feel. But I mean, it's a bakery. I think there's some degree of like immaturity. Like if someone's really railing you for having Bimbo on your shirt, I mean, how immature is that person?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, people get hung up. They're like, oh, we want Wawa. But I mean, Bimbo's making the best offer, and now they're making this, I don't know if I'd call it a concession or maybe it's a concession, but like, hey, on the secondary jersey, we're going to put one of these other brands so everyone has a little bit of something to wear. There's so much Union merchandise that doesn't have Bimbo on it anywhere. So, yeah, I mean, I like it. I think they're a good partner. Their U.S. headquarters is right outside of Philly. So you got that local element of it. I don't buy into what a lot of the complainers are doing. I think it's a small minority of people, a vocal minority. I get it. There's some validity to the argument that you want kids around town wearing it as like a billboard and advertisement for the team. So it probably hurts a bit there, but yeah, I mean, I'm pro Bimbo, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm honestly surprised. The last couple of people I've asked this question to, nobody's come on here and say that I've hated it. I'm not saying that I want somebody to come on here and say, oh, I hate it just because I said that. But I want people to say how they feel. And so, I mean, I think you're spot on where it's like minority of the people are the ones who are against Bimbo and everything. And it's they're vocal and everything, absolutely, but at the end of the day, I mean, you see more and more people wearing the jersey and not complaining about it, and I think that's the way most of the fan base feels. And for me, it's just whoever gives the most money, I'm all for it. So
yeah, and I mean, ultimately, and I'm fortunate, I've been a fan for so long, I have one of those 2010 jerseys without a sponsorship on it. I sort of hate being a walking billboard for a brand altogether, right? Yeah. So it's sort of crappy having any sort of sponsor, but I mean, it's a function of soccer in the modern age, right? Yeah, I mean, it's better than a pyramid scheme. It's better than a betting website, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, you're spot on, and I'm just happy. I mean, hopefully it doesn't come anytime soon. Where you look in England, I know they have sleeve sponsors now and everything. So I mean, these jerseys over in Europe and everything are turning into walking billboards, kind of like the NBA and everything. So at least, like when you look at MLS jerseys, you're like, okay, well, it has one main sponsor and everything. Then everything else is just a plain soccer jersey and everything. So I'm hoping that doesn't become the case in MLS, but at the end of the day, I feel like, teams can make more money than they're going to try.
Yeah. And there's like, I guess there's like a coolness factor. It'd be cool to have like Yingling or some sort of beer company on there. Yeah. But again, you get sort of into that business discussion as well. Like what's the business sense of all this, right? And a lot of your previous guests already called out that Bimbo makes a lot of business sense as well.
Absolutely. One new question I want to bring up is, for you, what player surprised you the most last season? I mean, take that however you want. It could be a player that you thought was going to be terrible but performed well, or a player that you thought was going to be good, played bad last season.
So I think Kai Wagner he caught me off guard. Not that like I didn't think he'd be like a bad player, but you hear third division Germany and you're like, oh, geez, here goes the Jay Simpson saga again, right? Where, fourth division England, third division Germany. Why can't we just get some top tier talent? But I mean, Ernst's scouting network, I mean, definitely proved all of our, nervousness wrong. And he brings in, I mean, arguably one of the best left backs in the entire league. And I mean, I could not be more thrilled with that signing, with so much hesitation when I initially read third division Germany around it, right? I thought we'd maybe be rolling with him and Matt Riel. And I mean, it really turned out not to be much of a contest at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was the same way, third division. I mean, the same kind of with Sergio Santos. When they signed him, I was like, this guy's not playing in a big league. But I think, for me, I had Kai Wagner as the biggest surprise of the season, but I won't copy you. I'll say Jack Elliott. I think he really proved himself this season. He was a player who was drafted late in the MLS draft, and he wasn't supposed to be on any MLS team just going that late. But to his credit, each year he's got better and better and better. And he formed an incredible partnership with Mark McKenzie this season to ultimately get Auston Trusty out of there. But, we saw good defensive plays from Jack Elliott this season. We saw Jack Elliott coming out with such crucial goals for us to either tie the game or win the game. And it's like we have a center back partnership with Mark McKenzie and Jack Elliott for at least the next 2-3 years. I don't think Jack Elliott's going to get sold over to a European team. I think MLS is probably as high as he'll go. But Mark McKenzie, I think, potentially go over there to Europe or someplace just because he's so much younger than Jack is. But I was just really surprised to see how well Jack played this season.
Yeah, I mean, Jack's one of those guys I feel like he doesn't get as much credit as he necessarily deserves because, like, if you think about it, this is really the second year in a row he's just put in a great season. And the fact that he can do it consistently is just, this was his third year, I think, right?
Third, yeah.
In the league. Yeah. So like we saw a little bit of what he could do his rookie year. He had a great season last year and another even better season this year. And the fact that he's consistently doing this as a center back in the league, I mean, for a very reasonable price in terms of salary right now. Yeah. And he totally deserves that. And I mean, it's fantastic they were able to find him via the draft of all places. The fact that he's consistently performing like this just makes me very excited. And it gives us a lot of stability in the back line.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. So I've been naming off players and everything coming back next season. Not going to do that, save time and everything. I mean, you've been a fan for 10 plus years and everything, so you have an idea who's coming back. But the players out of contract are Colin, El Senior, and Jamiro. I won't get to Jamiro. I'll speak about him later on. But do you see Colin or El Senior coming back next season?
I would actually really like to see Colin come back, which I think is a little different than your previous guests. I think him as a veteran player at a reasonable contract price, I don't think he's probably asking for much more money than he did last year. I like having him as like the guy on the bench behind Jack Elliott and McKenzie and even acting in a little bit of a mentor role. I know he's maybe a rough around the edges type player and can be reckless at times. But I think having a veteran like that who's been all around the league on teams like Kansas City and the Red Bulls, I think he has a lot to offer those younger center backs that are ahead of him in the lineup. And as we saw this year, he's able to step up when he has to as well and like really step in without missing a beat. I think he's a good senior player to have, assuming you get him at the right price. And I mean, same with Ilsinho. I think the question is, do you get him at the right price and to bring him back? I don't think you want to break the bank, giving him like a big pay raise to bring him back, even though he's like obviously the secret weapon off the bench. I hope we see them both back.
Yeah, I agree with Ilsinho and Colin. I mean, if he comes back, great. If he doesn't, then I believe they'll bring back another center back, a veteran center back and everything. I mean, yes, you're right. Colin was very, very clumsy at times and everything, but I mean, he's been in the league for forever, it seems like now. And so, I mean, he knows how the league plays. And that is, I mean, I said the same thing the last couple episodes about Ray Gaddis, whether or not he starts, and we can get on Ray a little bit later, is up to Jim and everything. But it's like a player that's been in the league for as long as Ray and Colin have. I mean, you want that veteran mindset in such a young team like the Union have, and especially with two more players coming from the academy and Jack DeVries and Cole Turner and everything. I mean, these guys are going to need players like Colin or Ray Gaddis to mentor them as they progress as professionals.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially if you're skewing younger, I think having a veteran and a veteran who's willing to be on the bench too, that's not going to be unhappy not playing and not starting, which seems to be the point of the career where Colin's at. I would imagine Ray's such a good soldier. I'd imagine he'd be okay with that as well. Yeah, I think having players like that on the team, even though they may not be the flashiest or sexiest options, they're great squad guys to have. A lot like Warren Crevell was for the team this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when he came on, he did a job, and that's all you can ask. You don't need someone to come on and make an impact all the time. I mean, if somebody can just sit down and do whatever Jim tells them to do, whether that's just keep possession of the ball, win the ball back, it's all you got to do. I mean, you don't have to constantly be up there trying to score goals and everything. I mean, different players have different roles, and I feel like a lot of fans are like, "Oh, well, this player is coming off the bench. I mean, this player got a score, got an assist, and everything." And granted, I mean, we were lucky seeing El Senior do that. It seemed like every other game, and that is one thing I worry about El Senior. I know he's 34, going on 35, I believe. And it's like he knows that he's a bench option on this Philadelphia Union team, but I feel like, he does still want to start. And it's like if the Union, the only way to get him back is to overpay him, then I think it's best to let him go and everything. I mean, yes, he helped us win games and everything, but we saw as the year went on, he kind of slowed down a bit and teams started to figure out, okay, this is what El Senior is going to do. And it's like, I want El Senior back because of what he offers and everything. But if the only way to keep him happy is to overpay him, then it's like you got to move on.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think the only reason I'd be hesitant would just be what does the rest of that roster look like next year? What's the complexion of the team? Because, I mean, you take El Senior away as a bench option. What are your attacking bench options, especially now that you have Picault gone? Who is that game changer that's going to come in off the bench?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, speaking of Picault, what are your thoughts for the trade of Picault to FC Dallas for 370,000?
I actually really like that move from Ernst. I mean, your past episodes, you mentioned there's questions on whether he actually fit in this system to begin with. And I think, like, along with him and Harris, was it a rumor last year that Kincaid reported that, like, Ernst was maybe not thrilled with having those players in his system to begin with. So I don't know if I'm necessarily surprised, especially after the season Fafa had the last few years. Like, he probably would have been asking for more money. He was out of contract. I think price-wise, he was probably right where he should have been, and paying him any more money, especially in the union system, didn't make sense to begin with. I mean, the fact that they were able to trade him away when they hadn't even had him signed yet, just trading his rights away for, I think, a decent chunk of change to Dallas, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, obviously he's a fan favorite and people love him, and I really loved him his time here as well. But rationally, it makes a lot of sense to move him.
Yeah, I mean, you've heard my thoughts on that, so I won't beat on to it anymore. Then, I mean, if you guys are curious what my thoughts are on, then just go ahead and listen to previous episodes. But what about Auston Trusty? Were you surprised that the Union traded him? I mean, he had a club option for the 2020 season.
Trusty, like, similar to Fafa, like, it sucks to see him go, but it makes a lot of sense why they make that move, especially with Elliott and McKenzie just emerging as the center backs of choice. And we had a surplus at that position, and someone was going to be the odd man out. And the fact that they're able to move Trusty, particularly at a time where he's probably wanting a contract extension or going to want to be moving on to Europe in a year or two anyway, it makes a lot of sense to move him and honestly get a good chunk of change for him. $750,000. I think that's a perfect price for him in league. I know there's the logic that maybe you could have sold him for more, but even after MLS takes their cut and then you get however much of that transfer fee back, maybe it's comparable to the $750 million anyway, or $750,000 anyway. Plus you have the sell-on fee, which was great to negotiate into the trade as well. I'm going to miss him. I hope I want nothing but the best for him. I hope maybe he breaks into the U.S. team eventually. But from a Union perspective, it just made a lot of sense to move him when you have Elliott and McKenzie sitting there. He was surplus.
Yep, I agree 100% with you. Now, are you concerned at all just that the Union haven't announced any signings yet? I was a little bit disappointed in Joe Tanzi. I love Joe Tanzi's report a couple days ago where he said, "Oh, I have some big announcement to announce," and so everybody thought that it was going to be a player, but here it is, an interview with Sugarman, which is a big deal. I mean, I don't think people realize how hard it is to get in touch with owners of any corporation, team, or whatever. So, I mean, congrats to Joe Tanzi for pulling off the interview. But I feel like he could have came out right away and said instead of teasing it a little bit. But are you just surprised that the Union, like I said, haven't signed anybody yet? I mean, you look at Kansas City, who was supposed to be in the same market as us as a team who doesn't spend money, but they just went out and paid Chivas, who play in Liga MX, $5 million for striker Alan Paleto.
Yeah, Joe, you're killing me over here. You got my hopes up. I'm like thirsting for any little bit of news or player rumors, and there just has not been much of that. And then, yeah, like you said, it's being in a major market like Philadelphia and being treated like a small market and being lapped by tiny markets like Kansas City and, Vancouver just made a big splash. We're bigger than all these cities. And, it's like we don't get I don't know. In my opinion, we don't get treated the way a city like Philadelphia deserves to be treated in this market. Now it's a function of ownership. I get it. There's not much we can do about it, but man, I hope we get some news soon, and I hope we get some flashy news. I don't want all Moneyball all the time. I don't want, and those interviews with Joe did, which were interesting reads, but like you can tell how proud Sugarman is that they're a thrifty, smart team. And that's good. You want to be thrifty and smart, but you also want to have some of that top end money that a big city like Philadelphia should be getting. And I hope we see it. I'm not overly optimistic we will, but I hope we do.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing that concerns me. You said we just saw Vancouver, I think, pay $6 million for a striker. Like I said, we saw Kansas City pay $5 million for a striker. It's like Philadelphia is a top 5 sports market in this country and everything, and it sucks that there's no news whatsoever. And it sucks in general too that in MLS you don't really get that much news on player rumors and everything, or all this deals going on and everything. And I know you see a lot of those BS rumors over in Europe and everything, but I mean, you just got to follow the right guys. You got to know people who have links with the clubs and everything like that. But I feel like in MLS, you don't know that at all. Like you see MLS coming up with their own rumors and everything just to get traffic to the website. And it's like, I don't want to hear any of this. I just want to hear something that's concrete. And for a team like Philadelphia to have nothing going on this season so far is a little bit disappointing in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like I'm sure Ernst has stuff going on behind the scenes, but at the same time, it's probably players like Kai Wagner, like Jamiro, Monteiro, just people that I'm sure they're great players. I trust Ernst 100%, but it's not that sort of pizzazz that you sort of hope for that like it really energizes you, right? It's sort of that wait and see type player, and like, okay, this could be something good. We may have a few kernels here. Watch the mixtape video that the guy put out with some crazy techno music behind it. All right, great. But it's like, that's why for me personally, Marco Fabian got me so excited, because he is a player with the type of pedigree that I think this team deserves, and like the type of player that we should be regularly connected to rather than a once in a blue moon type thing. Like, right, the big names, like really the entire Union history has been like Fabian, Bedoya, Maurice Edu, and I mean Freddie Adu are the big names in Union history that like a commonplace soccer fan maybe has heard of before. And I wish, not that those guys always pan out, but I just wish we had a little bit more of that to grasp onto and maybe hook people in. But those are my thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, and it's disappointing too. I mean, reading Joe Tanzi's interview, and you see Sugarman say it's not about any one individual. If you ask me, I'd rather have 1 million players or $5 million player. We're more team focused, and I like to have that quality spread all over the field. We like depth all over the field. Okay, you said you want $1 million players, but like last season, there was only 2 players making over $1 million, and that was Ali Bedoya and Marco Fabian. So why the hell are you going to say that when you only gave 2 players over $1 million? It's
you took the words out of my mouth. It's like, you want $5 million players? Go buy $5 million players and, quit messing around. How about you pay for an actual transfer fee for once, right? And hey, for me, like a lot of it's like signs of intent, right? I was going to cancel my season tickets until they signed Marco Fabian. And to me, that was like a signal to the fans that, hey, we care, we're trying, we hear you. We're going to spend some money and put some money forward. But like, and thank you, Marco, for helping me get over the hump and renew those tickets. I didn't want to cancel them, and I'm happy I didn't. But I just spend money. That's all I want. I want to see them spend on a transfer fee. And hey, if it's a swing and a miss, like I don't think Fabian was a total miss, but he was a little bit of a miss, right? But I can still respect you going out and trying. It's like when they traded all that money for a I respect the effort and intent that it showed to bring in and spend that money to bring in a David Accam, even though he didn't necessarily pan out, right? I pick up on those signals, and maybe that's not the smartest approach, but like to me, it shows you're trying, and that's what I care about. Like, show me you care half as much as so many of these fans do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're spot on with that. It's like you talking about in this article that we have the money. We have the money. Okay, well, if you have the money, then go and spend it. And like a lot of people are going to argue Marco Fabian didn't work out, but you see the impact that Marco Fabian had on this team. It brought in a lot of fans who maybe wouldn't have came to Union games. You've seen a lot of fans wearing Mexican jerseys. It's like signing Marco Fabian brought attention to this team. And yeah, I don't think he worked out as good as everybody wanted, but it's like, okay, you pay a player over $2 million. You got him from Frankfurt, and yeah, he had injury problems and everything, but it's like at least the intention's there. And it's like, if man, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm really not trying to. So I'm just going to move on. So, I mean, you talked about Marco Fabian a little bit. What are your thoughts on Jamiro Monteiro? Do you think he comes back?
I really don't know at this point. At first, I thought it was a lost cause, but the fact that we've gone this deep into the offseason and not necessarily heard definitively one way or the other that he's not coming back or he is coming back gives me some optimism. It gives me some hope that they're actually going to work a deal out. The fact that he was on the protected list during the expansion draft, and the fact that they released in that press release a couple weeks later that they extended an offer to him, that sort of caught me off guard. I didn't think it was even going to be possible to entertain keeping him here. And I mean, who knows what the offer looks like, or if the team that owns him in France is even going to play ball. But I'm like sort of weirdly getting my hopes up that he's going to be back next year.
Yeah, I think Mets, I think they're all for selling Monteiro. I think they just figured he doesn't fit in their team. And I think the Union do have the money, like I've said previously. I think they have the money to pay Mets what they want and pay money that Jamiro wants. But the thing that concerns me is Jamiro is 25 years old, and I still think he wants to test himself over in Europe and everything. I mean, he has no reason to stay in MLS and everything. And I mean, granted, he plays for a small country and everything, so it doesn't really matter where you're playing your soccer. But at the end of the day, I think he's a player that wants to test himself. But, at the end of the day, that's all speculation, because Jamiro, his time here was a quiet guy. You never got much out of him. So it's kind of hard to tell, where his mindset is.
I mean, from what we've heard, he seems to enjoy it here. If he wants to test himself in Europe and wants to go, but like, I guess again, the question is, what are his options in Europe? Does he go to like Sweden? Does he go to like a lower division team in Germany, or does he stay in France somewhere? I don't know. I mean, if that's what he wants to do, I totally understand. No ill will towards him. I hope he stays here, though. I do, selfishly, because I think we really saw how great of a player he is and how he makes the other players around him better, too. He's sort of been transcended for the Union. I think he's easily one of the best players we've ever seen in a Union shirt.
Absolutely. I think he's one of the best midfielders in all of MLS, too. I mean, he reminds me so much of N'Golo Kante of Chelsea. I mean, he wins the ball back and everything. And I mean, he doesn't have the best shot on him, but it's like, when's the last time we've had a true ball winner who can run one end of the field back and just keep working, being a workhorse? I mean, we haven't seen that much in the past. And Jamiro, I would love to have him back, but I'm not getting my hopes up for him. But what are your thoughts on Andre Blake's season?
Not the quality that I think a lot of people typically expect out of Andre, but I almost wonder if that's unfair, because he's just been so good since the entire time he's been here. And maybe, he's had some injury issues and is frequently away with Jamaica. I think we're lucky to have him. I think if we need to move on from him, I'm very confident in Matt Freese. I see Tomas Romero.
Yeah, with Georgetown.
Yeah, he just won that College Cup. So it's not like we don't have anyone behind him that I'm confident in, but I mean, he's like still the de facto number one. So I wouldn't advocate to downgrade, but if we had to move on from him, I'm confident in the guys sitting behind him. I think you get into like budget questions, right? Does it make sense to keep Blake on the roster and have him take up that much cap space when we could have Matt Freese, who's a homegrown player, not going to take any cap space up, start in favor of him. So, a slight downgrade at goalie maybe, but more money to play with elsewhere. I could see that argument, but I hope Blake's back and has an even stronger season next year.
I think everybody's hoping that he has a stronger season next season. I mean, we've seen it in the past, and it's like, why can't he bounce back? I mean, we know what he's capable of, and maybe he was just going through some things. Like you said, maybe he was injured, and going back and forth with Jamaica, it can't be easy on anybody. But the last player I want to bring up is Ray Gaddis.
So Ray, I love Ray, but I think he is, well, aside from the players we no longer have, the obvious spot on the field where we should upgrade, right? So like every year you just sort of look like, well, right back's probably a spot where we can improve. And I mean, nothing against Ray. I love Ray. I hope he stays on the team because he's another like great sort of utility player that can play on the right or the left. But especially in like the 4-4-2 diamond, where you don't have a lot of width in your midfield wingers, like there are no wingers, you're going to need those left backs and right backs to be able to get up the field and be part of the attack. And I think that's the obvious spot in this particular system that the Union want to run, where they should probably be looking for an upgrade.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to repeat myself either. I'll just say I agree with you. What are some players that you're looking to bring in that you want the Union to bring in?
So I don't have any specific names because I don't know. To me, that's sort of just trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, it is. It
especially
is.
For who knows who's in Ernst's scouting network, right? I'm sure, like I said earlier, I'm sure it's going to be a guy I've never heard of, right? And he could be fantastic. I know you keep saying that you think we're set at striker. I'm not as convinced, especially in a 2-striker set. Like, don't get me wrong. I love Casper. I love everything he did. I hope he has a repeat season. I'm not ready to dive all in and count on him having that repeat season, right? So, to me, and again, this goes back to like pedigree, name recognition. Like, I would love just like a stone cold finisher that is good for a minimum of 15 goals a year and is going to be pushing towards that 20 goal limit with no questions asked, right? So like to me, I see like Martinez, and I just think like, man, if we had just a striker of that caliber and that sort of pedigree on the Union, just how much that would change things. Like you think so many opportunities with just shots that could have been buried this year on the Union that weren't buried this year. And if we had a guy that was just bona fide striker, a bona fide finisher, precision type guy, how much of a difference that would make. And that's not to take away what any of our strikers did this year, and Casper was great. I just wonder if he can consistently repeat that. I brought up like Elliott was consistently showing he's a solid center back in this league. I want to see a guy that's a consistent striker and can consistently bury shots away. I mean, maybe Casper's that guy. He did get a late start this season, but we need 2 strikers up top. I mean, why not bring in another one? Maybe even to, draw defenders away from Casper and really open up him as a player as well. Maybe Wooden's that guy too. I'm holding out hope that Wooden could really turn it around next season once he's acclimated as well.
Yeah, I am too. And I'll bring up another point about Casper is like, you said he got a late start and then he didn't even end the season with us. He ended the season injured. And I mean, he's a player who has so many injury problems and everything. So it's like, can we depend on him for a full season? And that's yet to be shown to us yet. Now, I know last season was the first we saw of Casper and everything, but it's like, we need a striker that can be dependent on. And the whole reason I say that we don't need a striker is because it seems like the Union are all in on Corey Burke, and I feel like they're set with 4 strikers. But I don't want Corey Burke back. So if they could make a move for Corey Burke, then I could see the need for a striker. And maybe you were talking about earlier, I mean, you want to see El Senior come back because he's a player that comes off the bench that can be a game changer. Well, maybe Sergio Santos could be that if he's not starting. Maybe if we go and sign a bigger name striker, a DP striker, then we let El Senior go and Sergio Santos is that guy that's going to make the difference. I mean, there's all these different possibilities, and I definitely can see why you say, yeah, I'm not convinced yet for a striker.
Yeah, well, you're right. That guy could be Santos. And I was actually really excited when they brought him in and like sort of swooped him away from Necaxa and paid him that money to play, right? So like we won him over a Liga MX team. So there's some caliber of player with Sergio Santos. So like he's a guy like I'm very hopeful for as well. It's just I feel like all those guys are sort of on the same level, right? Like Burke, Santos, Sherbilko, I feel like they're all fairly level with one another. I'd love to just see a guy that next notch up. And that's sort of, maybe that's foolish, right? They have other spots to fill or they need to backfill Harris's position. The number 10, do you trust Aronson? He's still so young. You hope he does well. You think he'll do well, but I mean, you probably want someone a little more seasoned in that position. I don't know if I want to totally rely on him, right? So there's other areas of need where right now, to your point, that they do have a lot of striking options right now. I just, with Sapong, like he has a great season, and then you're like, well, I don't know that he's going to do that again. Same with Picault and Burke. Right. It's been like every year it's a new guy in and out instead of just having that one guy. Like I know Bradley Wright Phillips fell off now, but like he was that guy for Red Bulls for years. And now Joseph Martinez for Atlanta and even like Zlatan in LA. Right. For these guys that just score buckets of goals. I would love to see a guy like that on the U.
I agree. Now, I messaged you about this earlier, and I should have brought this up a little bit earlier, but what are your thoughts that there's going to be no more Bethlehem Steel? I mean, now the Union second team is going to be called Philadelphia Union 2, or as everybody's calling them on social media, U2. Just what are your thoughts on that?
I read the reasoning. I think it makes a lot of sense. It never made sense to have a team called Bethlehem playing in Chester at all. At Bethlehem, I always look at as I always thought it was sort of weird the Union glopped onto Bethlehem and like act like it was an extension of Philly. Because if you've been up there, it's really its own unique market. Like having a minor league team up there, that's great, but you need to give it a little more due and a little more care than the Union were willing to do, I think. So like I really feel for the fans up there and like people that like really were all in on the Steel. But from a pure Union perspective and what they really wanted to use that team for, I think it makes a lot of sense to have them playing out of Chester from a pure youth development standpoint. So I think that's a good move. I wish the branding was better. U2 is so boring to me. I think they could have gone, I tossed out, they should have been called themselves the Chester Clippers. And then like really just, if they're not making a ton of money off those games anyway, fold it into the Philadelphia Union Foundation and make it like almost a charity oriented team where all proceeds are going to the Union Foundation or what some local Chester charities or the high school team, something like that. That's my idea. I don't know the logistics of all that or if Chester Clippers probably trademarked by the high school or whatever. Yeah. Maybe they could license it. I don't know. But, or call them Chester United, like the youth team they have down there. I think all of the two teams are just boring from a branding standpoint. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I'm conflicted, right? I feel bad that the Bethlehem and Lehigh Valley fans are losing their team, but really, I don't think... I think the Union half-assed it by putting the team up there and maybe didn't give the market what it deserved, much like they don't give Philadelphia what they deserve. But I digress.
Hey, absolutely right. And I was going to say, like, they half-assed they said the question and answers and everything. So everybody gave questions and they answered like 5 questions and everything. So,
yeah, they answered 2 of mine. And when they tagged me, they didn't get my Twitter handle correct.
I know.
So I had to search for them.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, like you said, we digress. But you said you are a season ticket member in the River End. What are your thoughts of the energy in the River End this season?
Yeah, I mean, after the last few years, I'll be honest, it was getting sort of not depressing in there, but like pretty dead. And this year, a little bit of a revitalization. I think a lot of games you saw the potential of what this fan base could be, and honestly, even at its like peak, like you see, like with the playoff game and Atlanta, like I think that's just scratching the surface of what the potential of this fan base could be. So it's like really exciting. If we have some more years of sustained success, I mean, that is just going to be rocking game in, game out, especially that second half of the season where we were on top in first place for so long. And you know, we got our swagger back. And yeah, it was great. It was a fun time. Probably the most fun I've had in the River End since the early years of the team first starting, and we were all naive and new and shiny. I went to a Twitter town hall with Tim McDermott and like a bunch of other guys early at the start of this season, and it's easier to be new than new and improved was one line that was tossed out there, but like you almost see glimmers of the new and improved River End and fan base. If they could just keep up this upward trajectory, I think it could be something special again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad I caught it at the right time, and I hope that it can just continue into the future, and we can continue to bring new fans into the stadium, new fans into the River End, or just throughout the whole stadium. Like I said, I mean, it can be something special, and I think we caught a glimmer of that last season, and I don't see why that can't be the consistency going forward. Why that can't be the standard. The last thing I want to bring up is, like I said, you're a season ticket member. Did you think that playoff win against the New York Pink Owls was going to be that day? Did you think this is it? This is when we're finally going to win our playoff game?
Walking into the stadium, yeah, after that first half, I wasn't so sure. Man, I mean, and what a day too, and like cold, wet rain. I'm. It's still like hard to imagine, right? I was at the first playoff game we had against Houston in 2011, and that was it was just such could not be more different of an atmosphere because Houston got that early goal. But like even when again, like I'm going back, like when Red Bull scored that early goal and hey Union, wake the f up, chants started count. It's like everyone in that building knew it wasn't over yet because they've seen this team claw back so many times before. And man, what a great moment for the team, and it was exciting. It was everything you could hope for, except for what happened in the next game, right? So, I mean, enjoy it, love it, but I would encourage people to keep asking what's next, right? How do we get even better, and how do we top that moment in the future?
Absolutely, I agree, and I mean, I don't see why that can't be the standard going forward. Being in the playoffs every single year, winning a playoff game, winning two playoff games, and then ultimately lifting MLS Cup. And I would love to see the team bring in enough depth where we can take the U.S. Open Cup serious and we can take just MLS Cup serious and everything. I would love to see us make a deep run again in the Open Cup, and I know this is crazy, but I would love to see next season or the year prior us lift a double. I mean, I think that's the goal for everybody.
I would love to. I mean, I hope they still stay focused on Open Cup. I absolutely love the Open Cup as a competition. But yeah, I mean, they got to find a way to be competitive. It's only getting harder and harder to compete in MLS. You got new teams like Miami coming in. They're going to be, I'm sure, a juggernaut the way LAFC and Atlanta are. It's the type of team that's going to keep spending. Spending is going to keep increasing. So I guess the question is, how do the Union keep up, and how do they stay competitive? The league's only getting tougher, so it's exciting. I'm still optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I want to see where this thing goes.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. But why don't you let everybody know where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, if you want to listen to me ramble, much like I did here on Twitter, you can find me at Thomas19064. Follow at your, use caution if you're following me. Get ready to mute me because I probably tweet a little too much. And I can get very high and very low at the same time, depending on what the team did that particular week. But the Twitter community, if you're not on it, the Union Twitter is incredible. It's just a lot of fun. And I've been meeting this year more than ever before, just been meeting a ton of people that I initially interacted with on Twitter in person down at the games. And I mean, everyone's just been great. It's such a good group of nice people that I've met. And I hope to meet more of the Union Twitterverse in the future.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, I had a blast talking to you today, Mike, and hopefully, I can have you on a lot more during the season if you're willing to come on. And I hope to meet up with you at least once this season at the stadium. And that goes for anybody else that I've had on the show or who I'm going to have on the show, any listeners. I mean, I would love to just network and just sit back, watch the boys in blue, and cheer them on with you. So thanks again, Mike, for coming on the podcast with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for doing this podcast. I love having Union content to listen to, especially in the off season where a lot of the podcasts go sort of dormant. But I'm a big booster of all the fan podcasts or just any of the podcasts in general. And I'm really happy to have you in this Union community now.
Yeah, I'm happy to be on here too. I was a little bit, should I join, should I not? Just seeing that there's already a couple, but, I don't think you can ever have enough. And especially, like you said, with the off season, not naming names, just seeing people, just kind of quiet down until the season kicks back up. But, I'm happy doing it, and I'm happy doing what I love, just watching soccer and talking about the team that I love the most and just talking with different fans from every walks of life.
Absolutely, man. If I could listen to nothing but Union content all day, I probably would. The more podcasts, the merrier, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's a great piece to go off of. And with that said, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.